When we are walking through trials, when we're suffering through something, sometimes the last thing we want to hear is that there's a purpose to our pain. But I've got some words of encouragement for you today. Stay tuned. The Indian philosopher Osho argued that to avoid pain is to avoid pleasure, just as to avoid death is to avoid life. But when you're walking through pain, that's not always encouraging to hear, is it? I know it's not for me. And here's the thing, as I've reflected on the purpose of pain, all of us are either coming out of pain, or we're currently in pain or suffering, or we're getting ready to enter that stage. All of us are in one of those three places, but there is a purpose in pain. So, pain in the body has a lot of functions. It tells us something's wrong. It helps us make better decisions. It helps us protect our bodies when there's injury, but it can also make us stronger. One of the things that people don't always realize is that exercise initially, like the first few minutes of exercise, is noxious to cells. I mean, it can actually damage cells, and then the cells adapt and they adjust. And then from that, the whole body becomes stronger or more flexible, healthier, more vibrant, and more alive. That is what that pain produces. The same is true in our spiritual lives. James, the brother of Jesus, writes in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, My brothers, my sisters, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Well, when you're in various trials, you don't, joy might be the last thing on your mind, but this is what he says. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith will produce patience. Big deal, patience. But listen, patience produces complete, mature character. Well, I can't speak for you, but I know I want to have more complete, more mature character. And for a lot of reasons, but the time to do that kind of work is when you're still young enough in your mind to be able to make those kinds of characterological corrections. So pain strengthens our character. Pain, just like exercise brings out beauty in the body and makes it healthier and stronger, pain can bring out the beauty in our inner world and make us stronger and healthier and more um, adept and more resilient at being able to respond to life's setbacks. And aren't there many? One of the other things that pain does is it helps reset what we call that hedonic set point. Now, I have another video on dopamine addiction and what pain does, because pain and pleasure are co-located in the same place in the brain. When we have too much dopamine, it robs us of our ability to enjoy everyday things. Well, having some pain helps reset that hedonic set point. It brings it down lower. And so now we can find enjoyment at normal levels instead of where we might be finding them if we have a little bit of a dopamine addiction and the hedonic set point's been raised really high and we need a lot of a stimulus to get a little bit of joy. Check out that video. I'll link it in the notes below. But there's one other thing I want to say about pain, and that is we know that how a person experiences it and weathers it comes down to their appraisal of the circumstance. Now, appraisal theory demonstrates that the way a person frames an event in their mind determines its outcome. So, for example, if they frame something in their mind as scary and awful, they might be traumatized. If they frame it in their mind as, oh, that was unexpected, but I'm going to be okay, they're probably going to be okay. Now, that's not always true, but we find that with appraisal theory, when we kind of check the data around it, it tends more often than not to be true. That's why James says, count it all joy. Because if you count it to joy when you're going through those sufferings, you're much more likely to land on your feet than on another part of your body that you might break. I had a horrible fall a few years ago and shattered my wrist, and would have much rather have landed on my feet than on my left hand, all my body weight. Something to remember is that pain is a part of progress. Without pain, you don't have growth. Without pain, we don't have that strengthening and that development of our character. So as you're walking through these trials, remember to count it to joy. Remember to focus on the fruit ahead. Remember to appraise the situation in light of eternity. And to remember, my dear brother, my dear sister, you're not walking through it alone. Because whatever suffering that you have been through, our Heavenly Father, his Son Jesus, is no stranger to it. He um, has been through all of it. So we can rejoice with him as we partake in the fellowship of his sufferings, as Paul put it. I'll leave you with one quote. This is from a pastor named Craig Groeschel. He says, "Pain is a part of progress. Anything that grows experiences some pain. If we avoid all pain, we avoid growth." I hope this has been encouraging to you, my dear brother, my dear sister. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.